V. Srinivas. Yeah. So, good evening. Our Honorable Chairman, Shri K. Padmanabhaiah Garu. Our guest speaker today, Shri V. Srinivas, Additional Secretary, Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Grievances. Our special guest and guest of honor, Ambassador Syed Akbaruddin, distinguished audience, and especially so many distinguished guests who are joining this particular program virtually. I would like to welcome all of you to this particular oration. It is my humble privilege that in such a distinguished gathering, we are starting this series of orations, and Shri V. Srinivas has actually consented to our invitation and speak on a very important topic, that is leadership in government and the whole of government approach. Before I give the proceedings to the Honorable Chairman, I would just briefly introduce our distinguished speakers and panelists. So, do it from there. Next slide. Yes. So first, I would like to introduce. So just few lines. Just I will say so just few lines, 2 lines. So Shri Padmanabhaiah, everybody knows, is a former Home Secretary, and for us it's a great honor that he is chairman of our Court of Governors. He, as you can see, he has been has a most distinguished career. In fact, in the morning when Mr. V. Srinivas met him, he said that he is doyen of civil service in India. So I welcome you, sir, and I am thankful that you have agreed to chair this particular session. Yeah, next. We have with us Ambassador Syed Akbaruddin. Most of you would be knowing him. He's especially whatever biodata is there, but one thing is, which I think all of us are very much aware, he's one of the most followed civil servant on Twitter, and a great cricket enthusiast also. In fact, I am following him for long, and I can say that it's always a privilege to read his views. So, Shri Akbaruddin joined the Kautilya School of Public Policy on 1st June 2021, following a distinguished diplomatic career spanning more than 3 decades. He entered the Foreign Service in 1985 and retired in April 2020 upon completion of his tenure as the permanent representative of India to the United Nations. He was the official spokesperson of the Ministry of External Affairs from 2012 to 2015. He is among the few Indian diplomats who has the distinction of also serving as an international civil servant in the United Nations entity from 2006 to 2011. He worked at the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna, and he was the head of the External Relations and Policy Coordination Unit, and later also the Special Assistant to the Director General of International Atomic Energy Agency. He also served as the Consul General of India, Jeddah, in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia from 2000 to 2004. Having served as the counselor at the Indian High Commission in Islamabad, he is well versed in key issues between India and Pakistan, and also has worked at the permanent mission of India to the United Nations as first secretary. He was member of the UN's apex body, the Advisory Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Questions during 1997-98. And since his retirement, he has written and spoken extensively on global public issues, and he has a master's degree in international relations from the Australian National University. We welcome you, sir. Now, I would like to introduce our speaker today, Shri V. Srinivas, IAS, Additional Secretary, DARPG. He is currently Additional Secretary in the Government of India and also Director General of National Center for Good Governance. In DRPG, he has authored the Central Secretariat Manual of Office Procedure 2019, the Good Governance Index 2019, and the National E-Services Delivery Assessment 2019, and played a leadership role in Prime Minister's Award for Excellence in Public Administration 2019 and 2020. The National E-Governance Conference at Shillong in 2019 and Mumbai to 2020, the implementation of e-office in Government of India, CP Grams reforms, and the recognition of the National Center for Good Governance as an institute of focus by the Ministry of External Affairs. In 32 years, in fact, I think it's 33 years now, sir, of distinguished service, he has served as Deputy Director Administration, AIMS, Director General National Archives of India, Deputy Secretary and Joint Secretary in Government of India, Secretary to the Government of Rajasthan, Advisor to India's Executive Director in IMF, Private Secretary to the Finance Minister of India, and Private Secretary to External Affairs Minister. He has also served as Chairman of the Board of Revenue for Rajasthan, Ajmer, and Rajasthan Tax Board. Shri Srinivas is a recipient of several awards, including Digital India Award in 2020, 2016 e-office and digital AIMS projects, merit certificates with cash awards and citations from Government of Rajasthan in 1998 and 2018 for excellence in public administration conferred by Chief Minister on Independence Day, and the 3 National Productivity Council Awards in 1995-97 for highest productivity in rain-fed agriculture. Srinivas is an Indian Council of World Affairs Fellow for 2017-19 for his book India's Relations with the International Monetary Fund, 25 Years in Perspective, published in 2019. Shri Srinivas' second book, Towards a New India, Governance Transformed 2014-19, was also published in 2019. Shri V. Srinivas has authored 171 article papers on public finance and public administration and delivered 70 orations. In fact, many of our faculty colleagues have not written this much. I can be assured of that. So thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And it's our great privilege and honor that you have agreed to deliver this oration. Now I would request our Honorable Chairman to start the proceedings.
Friends, I'm here just to welcome both these guests. And Mr. Srinivas, I had not met him earlier. First time I met him this morning. When he walked in, I thought he's like a supernumerary assistant collector or maybe assistant collector, you know. And then when he mentioned about his postings and all that, I said, oh, he's a senior officer. Then he began talking, the enthusiasm with which he was talking about his job. I thought perhaps he's bluffing, you know, he's not all that senior. He must be still in his, early years in service. You know, when you join the service, you have a lot of enthusiasm, you know, with each year of service, the enthusiasm wanes. As one of my friends used to say, out of the 32 or so vertebrae which you have, in each year of service, one vertebrae disappears. And by the end of the service, you become, spineless, totally. So, but I must say he has kept up his, this one very enthusiastic, very dynamic. So he has been doing a lot of work and his main area is finance, but he has been working in the Department of Personnel and the Administrative Reforms Division. And they're in coordination with the IT department and IT and electronics, and with other departments like NITI and all that, he has brought in a lot of initiatives, a great number of initiatives, which I don't have to elaborate. He said Good Governance Index, and then UN's E-Government Development Index, then online registration with the hospitals, and then E-TAL, there is something called Electronic Transactions Aggregator, and so many other things, he has been sort of very much involved in that. He also, I am sure, must be chasing up the progress of BharatNet and PM's Innovation Awards. So he is very much committed into the innovation area and all that. So we are looking forward to his presentation on governance. And Shri Akbaruddin, again, I have not met him, but I have read so much about him. He is one of the most distinguished diplomats of our country. And then with a lot of elan and, dignity, he has conducted himself both in India as well as in the UN. And he is now heading an Institute of Public Policy. I don't know whether it has started yet. The courses perhaps he is yet to start, but I wish him all the best. And it's a pleasure to have you here, Mr. Akbaruddin. I don't want to give any lecture about the administration and governance and all that, but I would just like to say a couple of fundamental things. What is it that the government has to do? I mean, what is the main purpose of the government? I think government's main purpose is ultimately peace and prosperity. Peace, progress, and prosperity. These are the three things. Now, unless you have peace, both internally as well as externally, you won't have progress. Unless you have progress, prosperity would not come. There are so many things involved, the economic policy, the development policy, and all those things. But ultimately, these are the three things which really matter. And but coming down, of course, there are a lot of policy things at the government of India level you have to do. But coming to the implementation part, you know, because in India, everybody says our policies are really good, but it is the execution which fails. This is a popular opinion, and politicians also support it, saying that, look, we have made wonderful policy, but these fellows have failed us. They have not implemented. So it is the implementation which really matters, you know. Now, in implementation, as far as our country is concerned, now what is it that we must focus on? I think there are two things. There is one book called Digital Nation. It is written by the TCS managing director, CEO. It's a beautiful book, you know. In that he mentions there are two things which are very, very important in this country. One is jobs. People want employment. Unless you have employment, you have jobs, productive jobs. You can't go anywhere. So you create the jobs. The second one is services. Services means there are government services. There are so many government services which have to be given. Still, a ration card you have to get from the government. All certificates and permissions, licenses you have to get from the government. Now, in addition to these services, there are two very important services. One is education service. The public sector is still in the education. So the standards of education, the extent of education, the quality of the education, all these things, educational services and health services, most importantly. I think these two are the most critical for the government, you know, as far as India is concerned. Now, when I said jobs, again, on what does government creation of the jobs depend upon? You create a very conducive atmosphere for industry to grow by your policies. That's where the jobs are created. Two, better educational system. Unless your educational system is good, you can't create jobs. And the third one is skills. Provide the people with the skills necessary to do their jobs. And I think this is the areas where there should be focus. But what I see in the country is, are we doing this on the above lines? Are we focusing on these things? These are some of the important things. Now, while doing these things, good governance, you know, he heads an Institute of Good Governance, Institute of Smart Governance, all these things are there. I remember the first phase of Vajpayee's government. At that time, Advani ji used to say, Suraj, not Swaraj, Suraj. So repeatedly you say good governance, good governance. So much has been written on good governance, but we are still in the same boat, you know, we haven't really progressed very much. Now, ever since then, I mean, I have grown in the administration, but I served for almost 47 years in the administration, you know. The citizen-oriented administration, that is what we look for. But that also, I mean, we keep on saying that citizen-centric atmosphere, administration. Again, in addition to the services, what is it he wants? One is harassment that takes place and the corruption that takes place there. I mean, these are the two areas where I think government needs to focus. And then grievance redressal mechanisms. These are very important again to the people. If they have a grievance, they should be able to approach somebody and must get a redressal from that. Now, Panchayat Raj, you know, there is so much of talk about decentralization and all that, and grassroots administration. Somebody said it's not grassroots administration, it is grass without roots. So there are no roots, you know. Everybody talks of decentralization, but everybody centralizes. the central government centralizes, it doesn't give powers to the state governments. In fact, it takes away whatever is here. State governments take away whatever powers are there with the Jilla Parishads. In fact, you abolish them after some time. They take away all the powers of the panchayats. So you only pay lip service, saying that decentralization, nothing happens, So I hope some of these points he would cover in his this one. Now, what exactly, I said in implementation there is something wrong. Now, what is it that you require in a civil service? Because civil service reform also, people keep on talking about it, and he is directly responsible to that. One is, I think the most important thing I think it is necessary in a civil servant is a desire to perform. I think this is the most important, a will to perform, Now, people say, domain knowledge and all those things. Yes, domain knowledge you can pick up. If you can't pick up, you can have experts to help you. You can get any number of people. But if you don't have the will to perform, nobody can give you that will. Nobody can push you. I think that will to perform is very, very important, followed by integrity, intellectual as well as moral integrity. These two things are required. And one more thing, I think what government should do is, government organizations are hierarchical, vertical, it runs down, from the secretary, additional secretary, joint secretary. One of my additional, I'm sorry to Srinivas, he would say additional secretary in the government of India is neither fish nor fowl. He doesn't know what to do. Joint secretary does everything. Secretary, ultimately takes the responsibility. But what does a additional secretary do? But luckily, additional secretary one lasts only for a year or two. They become secretaries, That's good. So, but the point I am trying to make is, the organizations in the government are sort of hierarchical. I think we should flatten these things. The flat administration, small groups working and delivering, like in the private sector, especially in the IT area. I think that is what is required, I will give you a small example. Our supervisory structures are much more, and powers, people are much more in the supervisory structures than in actual performance. I've taken a lot of time, but I would just give you one example. When I was collector in Nasik district, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi then said, the homestates have to be given to all the people who don't have these things. And then she gave a target for the entire country, during just before the emergency or around that time, before the emergency. And some number, so many million houses have to be built. She writes to the chief minister. Chief minister marks it to the chief secretary. Chief secretary marks it to the divisional commissioners. What he does is, the state quota, let us say, is about 5 lakhs of houses. For 5 divisions are there, he would say for each quota is 1 lakh of houses you have to build. That's all he would write, nothing else. So it would go to the commissioner. Commissioner would send the letter to the collectors. If there are 5 collectors, he would divide that and say 20,000 houses you have to build. He would send it to the subdivisional officer. Subdivisional officer again, then he sends it to the Talati, who used to call, here you call the village level officer. Now it goes to the village level officer, and what he does is, he gathers 1 or 2 important fellows in the village, and he would tell them, 10 houses banana hai idhar. You find some land somewhere, he would give the land, but he would tell them, find the material, the wood and, whatever it is. And they would use some local material, and then they would build the houses. Ultimately, the fellow doing the work is the last fellow, The entire hierarchy is just, there is a beautiful book called Bullshit Jobs. I don't know whether anybody read it. A great number of jobs in the world are bullshit jobs. They are there for decoration, they just don't do anything. I think we should cut these things, So, you should read that book, it's very interesting. That's all I wanted to say. I just wanted to give 2, 3 examples. Things have improved tremendously. There is no doubt at all. One area which has improved is in the financial fintech area. Payments now are being made so easily and so rapidly, I tell you. Even a street vendor accepts your Google Pay and all that, and direct benefit transfers. That has been very good. There are some areas, and then a lot of ease of living and ease of business is there. But still, I wanted to give 2, 3 examples again, because we should know these things. For example, Indian gas. I received that. you have to give your mobile number, registered mobile number. I wanted to add an additional mobile number to that. For the last 1 month, I'm going round and round and round every website to find out how to put one more additional this one. Ultimately, I have decided I have to go to this one. I have still not found the time, but I would go to the office, Indian office, and then try to get it done. Now, can't we do this? I mean, there is a provision there. It says you press this, you go here, you go there, but nothing happens, The second one, my wife has a bank account in some place in Godavari district because she has lands there. Now, it is a mostly inoperative account, but she gets some interest on whatever is there. For filing your income tax, you require a copy of the statement. I have written 5 letters to this fellow, to the bank manager, one after the other, saying that please send me a copy of the statement of account. First, he told me that you are not authorized to ask, it's only your wife has to sign. I agreed. I said, you are right. So I made her sign, and then, that copy along with a forwarding letter, I said, you should not forward, it is the lady who should forward again. Okay, I made her forward that letter also, but it has not still come. Now, for a man here trying to improve administration and ASPI, Administrative Staff College of India, if this is what happens to me, now what would happen to others? So I think a lot of things have to be done, Then there is one more thing which needs to be done when we are innovating and all that. What is called testing. In all IT programs, what they do is they test somewhere on an experimental basis whether it works or it does not work. But in the government, the system doesn't prevail. Immediately, policy is announced, it would be done in 100 districts or 200 districts or 500 districts, God knows what. I would give you an example. The income tax portal, for the last 3 months, they have been advertising because they have given it to Infosys. Now, the damn thing, earlier I used to download the Form 26A very easily. Today I have to struggle. In fact, I wanted to bring this one. I wrote to my chartered accountant. He said, sir, by evening I would give you, he said. 5 days later, he sent it to me with an excuse, with an apology, saying, sir, I couldn't open that site. And the finance minister has written to him, to Nandan Nilekani some time ago, but still, I'm telling you yesterday's picture. The second one, exactly, again, the COVID, this one, How many times it was rejected, you rejected this, that. Ultimately, I found a slot, and then some date was given to me. Now, 5 days later, they said it's cancelled. I don't know why. It has been cancelled. Okay, you are cancelled. Maybe the vaccine is not there or something else is not there. But should you not give me an alternate date? Should I again ask for that? I think still a lot of things have to be done, I think this test things, the pilots have to be done, and then you go into the other one, I think these are the few points I wanted to mention, but very erudite presentation is there. And I must thank Srinivas for one more thing. After the COVID, this is the very first meeting of a public nature. Otherwise, we have been conducting some classes for bank managers and all that. We have conducted courses face-to-face for about 300 people in the last 2 months. But still, as a public meeting, almost a semi-public meeting, this is the first one. So I must thank you for coming. And I am told online there are some stalwarts attending this meeting, like Venugopal, who was the governor of Venugopal Reddy, governor of the Reserve Bank, and then the former cabinet secretary, Ajit Sethi, and a lot of others. So some more people are attending. So I wish him a wonderful presentation, and I hope you would all benefit from that. And thank you once again.
Now I would like to request Ambassador Ambassador Sayuddin to please set the context and give his introductory remarks.
Shri Padmanabhaya Garu, Shri Srinivas, Mr. Sharma, and some old friends who I'm meeting after 35 years. Dr. Usha Ramchandra. Among them, I've met some others also. That said, whenever I look at audience, which consists of academics on one side, and civil servants on the other side, I start getting nervous. And that's because I remember a joke that one of my friends shared with me about different professions. And the joke goes something like this. There are four professionals, all there sitting and saying, whose was the first profession? So first starts off, there's an architect. So he starts off by saying, first there was chaos, right? And then from that, God designed everything else. So the first profession is that of an architect, because God was an architect, from chaos he designed. The other one says, no. First there was chaos, we agree. But God engineered everything. He didn't design, he engineered. So there we are, engineering is the first profession. The third one says, well, I'm a believer in the Bible, so first there was chaos, and then God made Adam, and then from his bone he made Eve. So God was a doctor. So the civil servant is waiting, and there are three of us here. He looks at it and says, right, we all agree first there was chaos and then God did something. Who created the chaos? The civil servant. So you have three here. You can imagine the chaos that we are going to create now. That said, I just wanted to make a few quick points about what is termed as whole of government approach. Now, you are all academics and people who looked at administration. Many of you think that this is a sort of a much more recent phenomenon. Previously, there was a segmented or a sectoral approach, and now we have this holistic all of government approach. Now, I must confess that there are some sectors where always this has been the view. Shri Padmanabha Garu was Home Secretary. Security affairs, there always was a whole of government approach because that's the only approach they followed. I, in all my life as a diplomat, always followed in foreign policy a whole of government approach. True, from where it was once upon a time confined to some sectors, it's now moved to a broader canvas, because as was being told that what were the reasons for this expansion? So I hope when we talk about whole of government approach, we will remember its roots are going back to when government was first established, and you can go back to the Greek city-state. But whole of government approach is not new. What is perhaps new is its expansion to all segments or all sectors. Now, why did it expand to all these different sectors? There could be various reasons, and I'm certain Sri Srinivas will touch on some of them, but let me just quickly highlight a couple of them. One, of course, is that the whole, it's a numerical game, it's quantitative. So let us look at India when we became independent. At that stage, we had 18 ministries. Today, my colleague at Kautilya, who did some research for me, tells me that there are more than 40 such ministries. If we look at the secretaries to Government of India in Delhi, they are more than double that, about 80 plus. So obviously from 18, we've gone and expanded in larger numbers. So once you have more numbers, coordination perhaps becomes necessary purely in a numerical sense. But more important perhaps is that the complexity of issues that they are handling has expanded. For example, climate change. Now, if you look at climate change, the number of Government of India ministries which are handling that is enormous. You may think it's only Minister of Climate Change and Environment, but no, there will be Minister of Agriculture, there will be Minister of Energy, non-renewable energy, petroleum, coal, there will be many state governments involved, etc. and all. So obviously, the expanse or the nature of government's role has changed, and therefore, you need a more cohesive approach called the whole of government approach. The third thing was, Dr. Padmanabhan Garu talked about technology. Obviously, technology has perhaps ensured that there is a possibility of doing it better than what was done before. Different government departments previously did not have that capacity to engage online, to try and do things behind in the back room and then bring it forward to the front room. I can give you our own example in the Ministry of External Affairs. Passports was such a difficult thing to get. All of us used to struggle. I used to be somewhere in Vienna and I would get from my aunt who's 60 years old, can you help me renew my passport? I would think, what sort of a country are we that we want to renew a passport, which is a citizen's right, to call an ambassador somewhere who is she's like 80 years old. I was maybe 50 years old then, trying to help her out this. But today, there is no issue of passport. You can go, submit it, and get it done. It's worked because the Home Ministry, the local police, the Ministry of External Affairs, etc., all have worked on a common platform. They've looked at ways to synergize and respond. There could be also many other reasons, just purely about demand for public services and the nature of requests from public insistence that we want better services. And that could be a reason for a lot of public service delivery being improved compared to what we have faced in the past. All these could be reasons, but why is everybody looking at India? We've tried these experiments many times before. Actually, why they're looking at India is not because that we are doing it well or because we are doing it differently. They are looking at India simply because if we don't get it wrong, the whole world will get it wrong. Because, for example, if you don't get climate change right, the implications are not confined to India. They go in a transboundary manner and can impact people anywhere and everywhere. Similarly, public health. Global public health is now such a concern that if one country doesn't get it right, we all are going to suffer. Now, I'm certain all these issues will be addressed by Sri Srinivas Garu, but I want to mention some of the challenges also. The challenges are, there are limits to coordination. Let me give you just one example, again from diplomat's perspective. We have an issue on the boundary with China. And everybody is very concerned that China is not what we expected them to be. We were friends with them for many years. We were what we call frenemies. That means sometimes friends, sometimes not friends, enemies. This is a Bollywood and a Hollywood term called frenemies. But suddenly we seem to be the friend is going off, the other things are gone. Yet we are now following an all-of-government approach. But look at our trade with China. Today, China still remains one of our biggest trading partners. How did this happen? 1.5 years after we have issues of a very serious nature, which is impacting on our sovereignty, we still are importing, and largely the trade is largely imports. Very little of exports. The export percentage is, I think, about 30% or 35% compared to 65% exports. So now we're following this whole of government approach, but we still have challenges. That means the debate is still on. There is no right or wrong in this, but the whole of government approach, there are serious challenges in it. And I hope that Mr. Srinivas will address some of the challenges to it. There are success stories, innumerable success stories. The Aadhaar card and its benefits, financial inclusion, etc., but there are still remaining challenges. The last point I would like to make, and I hope he will address that, is while government is an important stakeholder, a primary stakeholder, in society like ours, there are other stakeholders. What are the efforts that are being made to bring them on board? Because we need to move beyond a whole of government approach to perhaps a whole of society approach or a whole of nation approach. And that's the way forward. And I hope he will bring those things out also. The last thing, that's the 6th point. I made 5 points, taken more than 5 minutes. The 6th point is, I just wanted to say, don't give the diplomat a microphone. He never ceases to stop. But I will stop and give the opportunity to Sri Srinivas to explain to you the bigger issues of the day. Thank you very much for hearing me patiently. Thank you.
So, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So now I would request Shri V. Srinivas to deliver his oration.
Get the PowerPoint going.
Yes, sir. We just, is it working now?
This one. Yes, that one, the next. No. Yes. Yes, if you give it to me. Yes. So, a very good afternoon, respected Shri K. Padmanabhi Garu, a doyen of civil service indeed. In fact, I have not had the opportunity to see Shri Gorwala or Shri L.P. Singh or B.G. Deshmukh ji in service. I did deliver B.G. Deshmukh oration a few months back, but listening to you, I was greatly inspired, sir. We read about you as young students, and of course, we saw you as Home Secretary when we, in our initial years in service, and leading negotiations in some of the most complex policy challenges India faced. And of course, my good friend Akbar is here, and one of the most eloquent spokespersons India has had, and a very distinguished civil servant in multilateral fora, a permanent representative to the PMI in New York. And of course, I recall how important that institution was in my years as private secretary to the External Affairs Minister visiting in post-WTC attack negotiations. And we saw how complex the negotiations were at PMI in New York. And kudos to all the great work and public service that you two gentlemen have done. I'll also address some of the key dignitaries who are attending virtually. Dr. Y.V. Reddy Garu, of course, a mentor from my initial years in service. Dr. Dubur Subbarao Garu is there, and our former cabinet secretary, Shri Ajit Sethji, and Shri Prabhat Kumar ji, our former cabinet secretary, director LBSNA, Shri Sanjeev Chopra, and Sharmila Chavli, the former principal finance advisor to Northern Railways, Paul Appleby awardees, Professor Ramesh Arora, Mary Parker Follett awardee, Professor Rumki Basu, senior IAS officers from Telangana, Rajasthan, Jammu Kashmir. In fact, some officers have joined from Manipur also today. And of course, senior faculty from ASCI, National Center for Good Governance, and DRPG, my own family, Mr. Kashyap and Shilpa here. Thank you very much for inviting me to ASCI. Even in my student years, the majesty and grandeur of this institution always inspired me to greater heights. And speaking in this auditorium today, in the presence of one of the doyens of civil service, is a great opportunity. And I see on the halls, on the walls of this hall, men like Dr. Rangarajan and I have Dr. Karan Singh, who's here. In fact, I met Dr. Karan Singh last week after returning from Srinagar, and he wanted to know how the developments were. And Dr. Rangarajan, of course, a man who has guided and handheld me many years as economic advisor to the Prime Minister in our years in 2010 to 13. So I have a brief presentation for you, and after that, we'll take up the question answer session. In fact, I was greatly impressed by the words that Padmanabhi Garu has said, that the desire to perform and the will to perform are very critical. And let me start with that. Does leadership matter? and you can easily say that, yes, leadership matters, and leadership matters most. Institutions rise and fall with individuals. And we have seen many institutions where massive institutional reform was made possible because the leader had the conviction, as also the moral and the functional strength to bring about change. Leadership and governance, particularly for an institution like ASCI, mobilizing people with different skills and backgrounds towards one common goal of advancing the cause of public administration. The constant need to unlearn old habits and learn new skills. For example, how do you try and operate and file a public grievance on a CP-Grams portal? It's not very easy. You need to learn a new skill. It's not like writing a letter. You need to get an Aadhaar password, or you need to file it on through double-factor authentication. So it's a new skill you'll have to learn. To unlearn and to relearn, that is something that the leadership in governance has to constantly focus. And power. How do you use power? The ultimate guarantee against abuse of power, and legislature, executive, and judicial, lies in the political and legal safeguards and vigilant public opinion. This is what Sirvai said many years ago, and this quote continues to be applicable today. Let me also give you another quote. The quote by Andrew Bettel, the Indian sociologist. A constitution may indicate the direction in which we were to move, but the social structure will decide how far we are to move and at what pace. This, frankly, is what decides. Even if you want to run very fast, you need to take people along, you need to build teams along, and that is how forward movement is possible. Leadership and governance. A leader has to bring functional and integrative unity by constructive use of differences and conflicts in organizations. In organizations, conflict is inevitable. There are many functional domains where conflict happens. And to make a group cohesive, the need is to power with and not power over. Often hierarchical structures tend to power over. But how do you take an institution forward? You need to power with. And in any organization, cooperation and conflict are inevitable. But can we use conflicts constructively to promote integration as opposed to dominance and compromise? There is a need to reject the process of giving orders which may not be obeyed. And the law of the situation is important when orders are depersonalized. This is a word that I read when I was reading about the leadership skills of Angela Merkel. She's one of the longest serving chancellors of Germany. And how did she rule for so long? Asymmetric demobilization. Asymmetric demobilization was dull the issues, depoliticize conflicts. There's an impersonal nature to several subjects of governance, and you depersonalize issues and take it forward. There are several types of leaders, and as what the chairman has pointed out, there are moral leaders, there are ethical leaders, there are leaders who by sheer performance become role models. And this is one, the legend of Milkha Singh. Milkha Singh was a very ordinary man, in fact, but his achievements in the Rome Olympics are still remembered. In fact, he's been a pioneer for so many athletes for the last 50 years. And this was the quote that Otis Davis, the gold medal winner at the 60 Olympics, said, "Oh man, he was fast." And he inspired a generation of athletes. So we do have civil servants who have inspired generations of people. And of course, one of them is sitting right with us. Last time I visited ASCI, Professor Harsh Sharma ji gave me a copy of Satya Nadella, and I thought I should give a quote about Nadella. In fact, his father was our director at the LBS Academy. And I was quite amazed when I read it, how he changed the work culture at Microsoft, the quest to rediscover Microsoft and imagine a better future for everyone. And he said, in any organization, transformation that has to stick has to come from within. Unless the organization moves as a whole, it simply cannot be transformed. So how did he do it? He started a conversation within the organization. He started a conversation within the community. And he said, families shaped his life. Families are very important. Parents, children said Microsoft is a second family. And the essential skills were Of course, you need technology skills like build an online cloud-based business, great emphasis on product design and economics of online business to be better understood. And he said, break silos, let's bring people together. And he said, let me improve the internal capacity and work culture. How do I define leadership? Leadership has to have individual character. I do recall what Dubur Subbarao once told me, that I asked him, how does he see the challenges of 21st century different from that of the 20th century? In fact, I was preparing for the Civil Services Day oration in 2018 in Rajasthan. He said, Srinivas, there's no difference. Commitment to larger public good against all odds remains the overwhelming motto of the civil service. So in many ways, the challenges that civil servants face in the 21st century are actually exactly the same as the challenges that they faced in the 20th century. There's very, very little change that has happened in terms of the fundamental and foundational values of integrity and ethics. And when I heard Padmanabhan Garu today, I exactly remember these very words, that the foundational values remain exactly the same. Since 1950, 1960, you look at 2020, the foundational values of ethics and functional integrity have to be maintained. Individual character comes from respect parents, love family, develop deep bonds, learn to work in teams, focus on a holistic approach. There's also a huge national character about it. Constitutional values deeply rooted in high moral tones with a universal dimension. When you read Article 309, which deals with services, Article 310, Article 311, they're very, very deeply rooted with a universal dimension. Transforming self, as was pointed out, care for the needs of workers, complete dedication to the well-being of the team. I held several jobs where people interaction was very, very high. I was at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and we used to have, on an average, about 26,000 patients a day, sometimes 30,000 patients a day, almost 3.5 lakh patients a month. A patient's journey in a hospital, how can it be simplified? And I'll show you what was done to bring in digital aims. And that was what gave me my first Digital India Award in 2016. A litigant's journey in revenue courts. Have you ever been a litigant? And cases go on and on and on. And I found a litigant's journey in a revenue courts could spread as long as 22 years in Rajasthan. And how do you simplify it? How do you make processes simpler? And a complainant's journey in grievance redressal. When we tried e-office this time in the Central Secretariat, it was very successful, particularly in the pandemic times. The AIMS experience of reaching out to people, to touching lives. It's important to reach out to people in distress. And the experience of touching hundreds of citizens who filed grievances in a pandemic. I'll share these with you. And it's very important to focus on the individual. In a leadership thing, it's easy to forget an individual and focus on the larger policy issue, but the focus on the individual has to be retained. It's also a marathon, and you have to remember the national cause remains broader. There are simply no shortcuts to success, and nothing comes easy in life. Hours and hours of hard work are required to sustain India's democracy. This is a quote that I found it very apt. Performance brings recognition. Recognition leads to respect, and respect enhances power. And this is a quote from Narayan Murthy's Wit and Wisdom, and I found it very relevant. And I said, yes, this is something that I must cite when I present leadership. You operate with simple business tools. Come to work on time. For example, many of you would have seen Delhi Metro. The trains are always on time. Everybody is dressed in a particular uniform. And there is a work culture that is definitely different from normal, regular organizations. Passport Seva Kendras, what Akbar has mentioned. The transformation, today you visit a Passport Seva Kendra. I recall visiting the Hyderabad Passport Center some years back, and the chaos was unbelievable. And today we visit a Passport Seva Kendra, it's divided into multiple branches. There's a A section, B, C, D section. By the time you come out, it's quite a pleasant experience, and you get your passport in 15 days. It should be something that's easy to understand, easy to practice, easy to communicate. And innovation is a very important tool. And we have Achlinda Reddy from SIPS here today. It's important to enhance productivity. How do you do the same job 20 times faster? For example, you look at, I used to be in textiles ministry, and I went to Romania and I found, or Vietnam, and I found a worker there could stitch 40 shirts. A worker working in Tirupur or Coimbatore was stitching about 20 shirts a day. So you found tremendous increases in productivity that could be brought in with better machines like Juki machines. So focus on research. Environment of curiosity needs to be built into an organization, and openness to new ideas. And at the end of it, India remains a meritocracy where transparency and fairness, as also accountability, speed, imagination are particularly important. And of course, one strong advice is work regular hours, relaxing daily. These are simple concepts, and you've got to stay disciplined. It's amazing how many times you work beyond 7 p.m. on a Monday morning, on a Monday, and you find many days the rest of the week trying to fix the mess that you've created on a Monday evening. Ethics are something that I've always focused on in many of these lectures, and a sound value system actually differentiates the long-term players from others. When you look at administrative ethics, you can say that the constitutional values are deeply rooted with a universal dimension. There are a huge number. You read the Constitution, and every time you read, you find that how vast this could be a constitution that would be applicable to several other countries. And ethical leadership is focused, fostering human capital, demonstrating empathy, and work to create a knowledge-based economy. And also there are work ethics and seniors leading by example, and also humility and decency. These are very, very important. And it's a form of self-accountability, an inner check on a public administrator's conduct. In fact, self-accountability and public accountability go together. So here's a quote from one of the earliest reports on public administration that was written by A.D. Gorwala, who was from the ICS. And he said, integrity remains the cardinal and philosophical premises of good administration. And you read each of the 54 reports that were produced on good governance in India, be it the Ramaswamy Mudaliar Committee report, and all the way down to the Yogendra Alagh Committee, Satish Chandra, and you'll find the same principles being repeated, that the cardinal principles remain the same. And as I said, the Indian Administrative Service, this is a quote that Dr. Subbarao gave me, that commitment to larger public good against all odds. As I said, the IAS competency remains anchored in the foundational and non-negotiable values of integrity and credibility. Now, we talk a lot of India at 75. This is our 75th year of independence. So what do we look at? And as the chairman rightly pointed out, development becomes a people's movement, Panchayati Raj institutions, successful implementation of flagship programs to bring together innovation, technology, enterprise, efficient management, clean and fair public administration, and a practice of value and a practice enduring value system. Of course, this is how administrative reforms look. And I was quite amazed to note, in fact, I recently did a lecture on history of the service dating back to 1833, when Akbar pointed out that when the British left, we had 18 ministries, and today we have something like 80 odd departments. And the growth happened when you look back further back. In 1833, we actually started with 2 departments when the capital shifted from Kolkata to Delhi. The Charter Act envisaged that the Governor General of Bengal would also become the Governor General of India. And a meritocracy did not happen till 1855, when Macaulay first introduced the system of competitive examinations. And that system continues to this day. The Federal Public Service Commission was established. And today you have a Union Public Service Commission, which conducts examinations which are fair, transparent, where recruitment is based on meritocracy. And that represents the foundation of the civil service. Of course, we have tried to broad base and identify performers by rewarding innovations. There are e-governance awards that have been introduced. E-office has, in fact, I was just mentioning, many of you would have read that the Darbar movement from Jammu to Srinagar, which entailed transfer of 282 truckloads of files, has come down because e-office was introduced in the J&K Secretariat. We saw it in the Central Secretariat. We found huge stacks of files everywhere. Today, you go to a Central Secretariat, you don't see files. The kind of paper clusters that offices had become have disappeared over a period of time. We also did the Central Secretariat Manual of Office Procedure. In fact, Curzon is one of the pioneering thinkers of Indian administration, and Curzon said all officers must write notes. So be it assistant secretaries, be it undersecretaries, be it joint secretaries or additional secretaries, Curzon's view was everybody should write notes. If the Indian civil service is to compete on par with what the British quality was, then they should be trained to write notes, document everything. So he created something called a Central Secretariat Manual of Office Procedure. And the CSMOP had to be amended significantly over a period of time. In fact, when I last did it, it was after 10 years. And we tried to enable the creation of a digital Central Secretariat. Also, how do you assess governance? How do you assess governance across states? And you could refer to this document of Good Governance Index. We're working with the Center for Good Governance in Hyderabad to formulate it for the current year. And there's also e-services delivery. How do you improve e-services delivery? The chairman was mentioning that he could not get his gas connection renewed online. Dur Subbaragaru once told me IRCTC could not be renewed online. Some of his ticket cancellations. How do you constantly measure e-services? Which are the e-services performing? Which are the e-services not performing? So this is what I'd like to share with you in the next part of the presentation. That is whole of government. And whole of government, I won't refer to the larger aspects with regard to integration, with regard to external affairs, security aspects, but I'd like to limit my focus to digital governance. And that is what remains the focus of changing face of administration. Now, whole of government actually represents the movement from isolated silos to networks and digital platforms. So you have huge number of digital platforms that are created that transform the way governance works for people, and to meet the increased demand on the part of citizens for more personalized and accessible public services. So whole of government actually needs leadership, it needs commitment, it needs huge amount of online service integration, citizen-centric design and institutional arrangements, infrastructure development, standards and integration. When you look at the global perspective of how digital governance looks, this is how digital governance looks. In fact, I was a colleague from Nagaland who works as Secretary IT, Mr. K.D. Vizo, once came to me and said he has a collaboration with Estonia and they are trying to create digitally empowered citizens. You visit Kerala and see the quantum of service portals and the integration of portals that has happened through Kerala government has actually led to digitally empowered citizens in that state. And when you see this model, and we have Aadhaar today, 20 years back when I served in the United States, I found that everybody had a social security number. I'm sure Akbar has a social security number too. And the kind of digital identities that were created, the universal digital identities formed the platform on which several digital services have been developed across the world. So this is a slide I've already dealt with. You need online service integration, citizen-centric design, institutional arrangements, infrastructure development, standards and integration. Each of these has to be brought together. And I'll refer to it in the context of what the chairman said with regard to the digital nation. In fact, I used to work with Chandrasekharan when the digital aims happened. And there is a chapter in it called Digital Aims in part of the digital nation. So we had Digital India launched on July 1st, 2015, one of the big transformational changes that India brought into its policy making. And it was a campaign to transform India into a digitally empowered society. High-speed digital highways were envisaged. Government is open, governance is transparent. And of course, we were viewed as a $1 trillion digital opportunity. Big sectors, healthcare, education, energy, financial services, e-governance, doubling farmers' income through schemes like ENAM. So in all, 44 mission mode projects were introduced under the Digital India program to take it up. And the impact was quite significant. We had 1.2 billion Aadhaar cards being issued. E-transactions have crossed over 100 billion. So many common service centers. The number of services offered on Umang platform has gone up to over 1150. We have a huge number of Jan Dhan accounts. I recall visiting villages as chairman, Board of Revenue, and I found everybody having a Jan Dhan account. Every woman had a Jan Dhan account. And the benefits of technology were largely accepted by rural societies. Several technology progress has been witnessed in several welfare state programs. So you do have the digital identity through Aadhaar, the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, DBT has been referred to, digital payments using the Unified Payments Interface and the BHIM app, Goods and Services Tax Network, and of course this Digital India Land Records programs was going on even when I was a probationer. It continues to this day. Then digitalization of ration cards, that has been a huge change. Fair price shops with biometric identity, then labor payments using NREGA with direct transfers made a huge change. The biggest success story in the entire whole of the nation, whole of the government approach has been the direct benefit transfer. And Aadhaar has played a massive role in DBT, and Aadhaar-enabled payment systems with network infrastructure has ensured that beneficiary digitization was possible, and deduplication of beneficiaries, which resulted in massive pilferage, could be avoided. And electronic transfer of funds was possible. There was also data security standards that were introduced. Let me go through some of the success stories. We do have, of course, the PAN cards that were introduced in 2002. We do have an online portal for CBDT. Environmental impact assessment can be done online now. Then you have the e-library. This is now, this was very useful in terms of the online education that was possible in the pandemic period. And online education was very different from virtual education. It was very different from distance education. For example, distance education we had for many years, but online education where students had to attend through online platforms was possible in a very big way in the pandemic period. Then you have the National Scholarship Portal, where lakhs of students receive their scholarships online. Then ETAL is a measure of various e-governance practices. If you see ETAL platform, it's almost like every second there are so many digital transactions happening. Then you have the digital signature certificates. I'm sure many of you are using it to dispose files, and DSC authentication is a very often seen one. I was closely involved with eHospital. In fact, the first eHospital project was started in AIIMS. It was launched on July 1, 2015. And the transformation that www.ors.gov.in brought in has been phenomenal and replicated in over 500 hospitals across India. Then Aadhaar-enabled payment systems are seen, as we have already discussed. Then MyGov. MyGov is a good platform for those of you who want to run an ideas box, you want to run a chatbot. These are very good. If you want to open up, say, on all these thoughts that Akbar has, you can just approach MyGov and say, give me thoughts, and you'll suddenly find every day 2,000 to 3,000 ideas pouring in. The last time we did a Facebook Live discussion on MyGov, we had 100,000 participants. So it is that kind of outreach is possible. Otherwise, it's not humanly possible to reach out to so many millions of people without a digital platform. Then eNAM has been implemented in more than 400 mandis. And so even if you're a cotton producer in Gujarat, you could sell your produce in Tamil Nadu. Then GEM. GEM has brought in huge amount of changes in procurement. And it has eliminated this direct interface between buyers and sellers. So you could just go online, register and purchase. Otherwise, procurement was a major challenge in government. People were scared to procure. Then you have Umang. I have already said digital land is a big thing. And the other day I was meeting Chief Secretary Telangana, and he said that they have now integrated mutation process with registration. So you could register a deed and your mutation happens automatically. Not many states have done it, but Telangana seems to be a forward-looking state. Then India Post Payment Bank, that is with banking correspondence, financial inclusion at its doorstep. E-pension is a good thing. A lot of Jeevan Praman certificates have become very useful. Then EHRMS is something that we have implemented recently. Otherwise, you would have to log into your ER sheet in one portal, your ACR on a separate portal, your leave application on another portal. Now, EHRMS brings together all the 9 or 10 platforms that were created with regard to personal management. Let me talk about two subjects where I had a direct role to play. And this was an innovation that won us the 2020 Digital India Awards, and that is implementation of e-office. I did refer to it in the context of Jammu Kashmir. Let me speak about how it happened in the Central Secretariat. How could we digitalize 25 lakh files within a period of 5 to 6 months? And the pandemic entailed less contact governance. Officials had to work from homes and in masks and gloves. And it actually redefined governance. To live with the coronavirus was a huge challenge. And you had to operate virtual offices. Departments which were not on e-office had to physically attend office during the lockdown. Web room meetings, new protocols were necessary. A digital central secretariat also necessitated attached offices, subordinate offices, autonomous bodies online. And virtual private networks and home working policies had to be created. Otherwise, people would come in t-shirts to attend meetings. So there had to be certain protocols that were introduced. People were not switching off their mics. People would keep their mics so that echo was being seen. So, and network security in terms of home Wi-Fi. So Kavach platform has recently been introduced. Even to enter your own email, you need two-factor authentication. The implementation experience has been quite phenomenal. 75 ministries and departments are on e-office. 57 ministries have achieved more than 80%. And today we have about 25 lakh files. There's a slightly dated number that I put there. 25 lakh files. Every week, there are more than 30,000 files that are being digitized. In terms of physical files, the physical files today are lesser than the digital files that have been created. And then the manual of office procedures had to be amended to ensure a digital secretariat. So virtual private networks had to be issued up to deputy secretary level. Functional web room creation has to be there. Then the central registration units had to be digitalized. So there is digital dark. There is no physical dark across the secretariat. In fact, files moving from one ministry to another through interministerial bridges. So e-office was awarded for the Digital India Award 2020 in jury category. The second one, let me talk about digital AIIMS. This has impacted millions of Indians. And 2014, when I joined AIIMS, this was the picture. At 2 a.m. in the morning, people would be queuing up opposite the Rajkumari Amrit Kaur outpatient department for an appointment which would start at 9 a.m. So they had to wait in lines, and many of them may not get appointments. Patients were looking for help to reach the destination. There was an absence of signages, and the patient journey was quite complicated. There was crowding at every counter. Blood collection centers were crowded. Registration centers were crowded, crowding on elevator lobbies, on the stairs. It was a state of chaos. And this has been documented in many books. Of course, I've documented it in my book on Transforming India. And Ramsevak Sharmaji has documented in his book, The Making of Aadhaar, in which he mentions how this www.ors.gov.in came in. And Chandrasekharan has documented it in Digital India, Digital Nation. So this was the portal that was created, www.ors.gov.in. And it linked Aadhaar numbers with unique health identification numbers. So, and a patient seeking an appointment could log into the AIIMS OPD appointment system and submit a request for appointment online. And we actually gave a unique digital health identity to every citizen visiting AIIMS. And the patient could use the UHID for the entire lifetime. Every consultation was documented. And over a period of time, it facilitated faster registration, dissipated crowds, introduced thousands of signages, screening at entry point, introduction of patient care coordinators, and a patient registration center was created so that the journey of the patient to a hospital was simplified. We also operationalized a huge number of new cadres, nursing informatics specialists, that is, nurses who could take a doctor's diary and place his appointment diary into a digital domain. Patient care coordinators, if a patient visited, he could be guided to the right department, right center where he should go. Data entry operators. So the registration time came down to a mere 40 seconds. And I've documented it many times, how the 3 a.m. queues disappeared in AIIMS. And the serpentine queues just disappeared. And today you go, you'll find a queue starting at 8 o'clock in the morning, and by 9, people are at the OPD counters. And AIIMS started treating 3.6 lakh patients per month in comparison to 1.6 lakh patients a month. So digitization is the future of governance, and that is what can bring in huge changes. And across the three institutions that I could digitize, AIIMS, Board of Revenue, and 1,500 revenue courts of Rajasthan, and now the Central Secretariat, I found digitization represents the way to India's governance future. So in 2016, AIIMS became India's first fully digital public hospital. 65 departments were digitalized, and including some were very difficult, like the radiation information systems, wherein which you needed picture archiving and all your x-rays and others could be digitized. And when you run a hospital with 5,000 odd patients, laundry, dietary modules, blood banks, on net banking facilities were introduced. It was a massive, massive change that was brought in. And AIIMS, of course, received huge mention. The Prime Minister commended this initiative. We received huge number of awards across India, Digital India Award 2016, PM's Awards in 2017. It was a very, very well recognized one and nationally replicated today. How do you measure India's e-service delivery? And this is important. NESDA, the National E-Services Delivery Assessment, was very important. And this is on the lines of the UN E-Services Delivery Assessment. And it assessed 6 parameters: accessibility, content availability, ease of use, information security, and service delivery, status request and tracking. So if you're focusing on the citizen, you've got to give him that attention and respect that he deserves. And these are the key findings of NESDA. And it was no surprise to see Kerala topping in terms of overall portal assessment, because they seem far ahead of the rest of India in terms of integration of portals. Telangana does very well too. It has a very strong digital system. And I found the same strength prevailing in Himachal Pradesh, Tripura, even Nagaland did very well thanks to this collaboration with Estonia. And when you come to the service portals, you'll find Nagaland doing very well. One of the reasons is they adopted what the Estonians were doing and they entered into a bilateral collaboration. Then similarly, Haryana and Rajasthan in terms of service portals, you can look at the Jansampark portal of Rajasthan. It's quite a forward-looking and very innovative one, or the Chief Minister's grievance window of Haryana. In terms of central ministries, the CBDT does very well, the recent glitches notwithstanding. And the Health and Family Welfare platform also has been doing quite well, thanks to this ORS.gov.in, which had one of the largest footfalls of Digital India projects. So this is the way forward. The way forward is how you need to create a digital ecosystem. E-literacy is important. Otherwise, you can often have internet-rich and internet-poor differentiation populations. And of course, security and privacy are very vital. And the focus has been on India enterprise architecture. So when you look at India 2022, this is how it looks. eSigns, DigiLockers, MyGov to reach out. Then you have eThal to monitor transactions, DigiLocker, because the front end is you have a Service Plus platform, but the back end is DigiLocker. And I think you should use DigiLocker more often. So let me conclude by saying this: leadership. Leadership is all about the courage to dream big. And unless one dreams really big, it's not possible to lead a nation of India's size. And the courage of conviction is very important. The courage to go against no-sayers, the courage to lead from the front, and courage to make sacrifices, that is, put in longer hours at work. And power is all about making a difference to people around you. And you need to create an obsession to win. And I saw it when Akbar used to work as a spokesperson, and the sheer passion he brought to that job was quite incredible. And often it reminded me of what Jassal would do in the same job way back when the Kargil war. In fact, 2 days back, we celebrated India's Kargil victory. And I was reminded of Raminder's position of what exactly he was doing in that period. And internet is a great phenomenon. It has brought in anywhere, anytime paradigm. So I have 2 slides more. Human assets walk out of office every day exhausted mentally and physically. A successful corporation ensures that they come back enthusiastic every morning. I'm sure many of you would have felt it. Exhausted, beaten, totally demoralized, and still you'll find the energy to pick yourselves up and come back on a Monday morning back to work. I'm sure many of you would have undergone that phenomenon. And that is what leadership is all about. Leadership is all about saying that I will walk on water for you. I'm sure many of you would have felt it when you were working with Padmanabhai Garu. I'm sure I felt it when I was listening to you. And it is said about creating a worthy and lofty dream and helping people achieve it. So the last slide I have for you on whole of government, creating a one-stop portal is a great step forward. And it is the right way to go forward on creating a whole of government approach. The portal per se doesn't guarantee such an outcome, but it requires massive re-engineering. Process re-engineering is required across huge vertical systems. The governance is almost like the Titanic, and turning it around is not easy. It requires huge amount of effort to turn it around. So, but there exist huge substantial benefits for both governments and citizens that can result from adopting a whole of government approach. So this is the presentation I had. I don't know if I've stretched out on my time, but I'm grateful to ASCI for inviting me today. It's an institution that has always inspired me to greater heights. So I thought I could indulge on your time coming here after 33 years in service. So I thought I should use this opportunity very usefully. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, yes, sure, sir. Yes, yes. Yes, sure. Okay. Please introduce yourself. And there are questions in the chat box also. Somebody can read out and then I can respond. Yes, ma'am, please. Mike, there's a...
It was mentioned in your presentation that the citizens are encouraged to take appointment online so as to reduce the traffic. So people who cannot afford to go online, they need to have internet connectivity, they need to have a system. How do they do that?
Yes, I'll respond to that.
How do they get to take appointment online? Was there any solution provided to them?
Yes, yes, Dr. Usha. I'll take one or two together. Yes, yes, please. Yes, yes. In fact, I'll take 3 questions at a time. Yes.
So, I mean, to bring, when we heard your presentation about the digital, transformation across various departments, ministries, but when we come to the handling of the pandemic and the COVID app, the app per se might be wonderful, but somehow as a citizen, we didn't get it. At least I didn't get a feeling that it was inclusive enough. It actually provided access to the people who needed it, and then the entire digitization that could have been brought into to handling the pandemic somehow seemed missing. So, some of your thoughts on it.
Yes, yes, yes. Anybody else? Yes, please. Yes, yes, please.
So I'm Ramesh, I'm the director of Silent Filter. Years back, a couple of years ago, I had an opportunity to interact with you and introduce 2 concepts. The first concept that he introduced was, a lot of people for the first time, was school hour. That is the provision of the urban facilities in the rural areas. And the second thing which he said that as a president, he said that I were just not doing performance. He says, whenever I say, he said, the transport is not there, is not work, it's fine, not work. He said, I introduced a system, where something to give orders. He said that if a definite period of time, this file doesn't move in a particular of this folder, in the launching the innovation, the file automatically goes to the next point. He said, that's what we know when people use it. My specific question is that how we integrate this first way. I mean, Gandhiji has said that the villages in India is reducing villages. But still we see the migration first thing, still happening. How do we introduce?
Okay.
That's a factor.
Okay. So we have 3 questions. Let me respond on it. The issue being flagged is the internet rich and the internet poor. There is a divide, and how can this be bridged? Well, there are common service centers that are available, and what we found was huge number of private kiosks came up outside AIIMS. People who, because the All India Institute of Medical Sciences attracted vast populations of extremely poor people from distant states, people coming from Bihar, people coming from Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, several states across India. People would come in, and they could, but the registration, online registration, pre-appointments was limited, was capped at about 50%. 50% was still walk-ins were permitted, and you could come there, get yourself registered, and move forward. And this was something, there are arguments and counter-arguments on how we take it forward, and you run into fierce resistance when you try and digitize an institution. When I tried to digitize the Board of Revenue in Rajasthan, I found massive resistance from advocates, massive resistance from board members. They said, these poor farmers who are coming, who are litigants, how will they know when their summons are, when their cases are being listed? You want to digitize cause lists, you want to digitize judgments being placed online, but it is far better. Have you ever stood in do you remember standing in a railway station to buy a ticket? In fact, you would have to stand 5 hours. Today, you have an IRCTC portal that works online. You can purchase it online. If you stood in a passport center in Hyderabad to get a passport, God save you virtually, because you would actually be, you could be, there was so much crowding in those days, and things have become simpler. And internet rich, internet poor divide notwithstanding, the road forward lies in digitization. And I think that is exactly the future. This has been my personal experience of digitizing 3 institutions. And of course, as regards Dr. Usha's question with regard to COVID, I think the app functioned very well. I think the gaps emerged, which were addressed subsequently, that walk-in registrations have also been permitted, in that people who did not have access to internet could walk in and get themselves registered straight away. And you spoke about Pura. Pura is a very good concept. And of course, file movement in e-office, you cannot hide, What e-office does is it eliminates hidden inefficiencies. And you can easily capture, say, for example, if I want to see how many notes have been done by a particular undersecretary, straight away you can go and see what he has written. It eliminates, you cannot hide in a digital system. The digital system brings out your frailties as also your strengths. If you're strong enough to write a memorandum and an office note, that can easily be seen. And the quality of notes can easily be deciphered. You just cannot hide the inefficiency in a digital system. While in a manual system, you could be hidden. You could escape behind the cloak of invisibility. Yes, sir. Yes.
Currently, what is happening? Are all the notings being done in digital fashion?
Yes, sir. All digital, except for confidential files or classified secret, top secret. All general files are all, both correspondence section. Yes, yes, yes. Also, with regard to the vertical hierarchies, there has been, and to introduce flatter organizations, an attempt has been made to review the channels of submission in government. And the ARC, of course, the Administrative Reforms Commission said channel of submission should be limited to 3. But when you actually see it in practice, you find 7, 8 channels of submission, keeps going up and up and up. And a massive review of the channels of submission is being undertaken to limit it to 4. That is the big effort that's going on to create flatter organizations. Yes, sir. In most ministries, it has been dispensed with. In 57 ministries, there are no paper files. In fact, except there are digital archives. In fact, even the record rooms have been digitized. And there is also e-Abhilekh Patal, wherein which 4 crore documents are available online. I think if you want to see Curzon's notes, for example, you can do it. In fact, I recently did a paper on the history of the service from 1833 to 1947 and was looking at some of the notes of Indian political service and how Indian political service was deployed. Say, Hyderabad had an Indian political service officer. So that was available online.
One point that you mentioned about this,
pilot should be done.
Yes, I'll respond to that, sir.
You were talking about the land cost.
Yes.
Now, you know, there was a terrible mess created in Telangana for about 4 months. No registrations could take place because of the land, there was so many defects. Now, I had done some pilot, all that did not have happened. For 4 months, no registrations are taken. And transactions.
So,
Now, I think one more pain point for that system is registration of, online registration.
yes.
Leases, sales, and all that. That doesn't happen. It's quite simple. In Hyderabad, they tried for some time, 2 years ago, they tried. In Maharashtra, they are doing it. They didn't get it. But I think there must be some, pilot testing.
Yes.
But second thing, one point I want to make, nothing like seeing is believing. Now, AIIMS has done there in Delhi. Is the system being followed in all other areas which have come up with?
Yes.
That's one. Two, why don't you take a set of the hospital administrators or whatever these various states, show them what is happening really in SC.
Yes. In AIIMS. Yes.
Let them stay there for a couple of days. Of course, they are all online. I think seeing has an impact. Similarly, civil servants also could be taken to your central secretariat.
Yes.
And show what is happening in certain
Yes.
departments.
Yes.
1, 3, 4 days and all that. I think that will help you.
Yes.
Spreading that.
Sir, I'll respond on the policy testing lab. I think policy testing lab is a very important suggestion. And how do you test policy? Because evidence-based policy making in government is a very limited exercise. Often when you try to look at evidence-based policy making, many of you are scholars of public administration here, and you'll find data is not available. And data availability is with a certain lag. It comes with 2 years lag, or at times with even 3 to 4 years lag. Census data comes with 10 years lag. So policy testing lab is a very important component. We're looking at it closely as to how to take it forward and create a policy testing lab in government. And we're drafting a scheme called Anusandhan, wherein which certain seniors civil servants can look at extent policy and see what has worked and the direction in which the changes can be brought into policy making. The second one, sir, what you've said, exposure visits, these are very important. Replications are very important. In fact, we do keep hosting these regional conferences on good governance practices, and Professor Harsh was keen to host one at ASCI itself. We would be happy to conduct one should ASCI be willing to come forward and collaborate. And on e-office, we did host a number of workshops for attached, subordinate, and autonomous bodies also. And the replication of the AIIMS model has been wide, sir. In fact, today, if you see ors.gov.in, you'll find 498 hospitals that are online. So huge number of hospitals across India have adopted. It may not be the ultimate figure. We'll find more and more coming in. But it has brought in a huge change in the way we look at hospital care, particularly in overcrowded public hospitals. There's somebody else, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Somebody. Yes. No, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Yes.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for the excellent presentation on good governance. I am Ramara, HOD of Political Science. So we often refer this to as good governance, bad governance, as well as smart governance. In your presentation, you had highlighted even about the transformation during this pandemic about online education system. It is a very striking change as a teacher. We can see that students have to even go for online assessments. Our teaching plans, which we were originally demonstrating, were outdated. So my only submission is, do you take this to a greater height when we are talking about digitalization and challenges in administration, especially when we are transforming or when we are accepting innovation? The challenge is like a municipal population will definitely oppose it or reject it, or they are testing and criticizing. So in spite of all this, I really thank that we are moving forward. There are some apprehensions, leakages, or even protests. but successfully we are transforming. Even education curriculum also got modified to a greater extent. The best thing was those who were rejecting us earlier, they would say, don't come, be in charge. Now, out of this bad situation also, they are saying, please join for this webinar, please connect. So connectivity happened. But then some are not lucky, just now as ma'am pointed out, net issue is always an internet connectivity issue. But we are moving forward. That is a bright idea. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for explaining the session, and it is really great to know about massive digitalization program in India. But my question is on the in absence of data disclosure agreements and reaching data and security of data, how a citizen will be ensured about that data disclosure and data reach in the entire system? Because there are many people that I don't know, like how I am exposed in each and every system and where I am exposed in this. How we are doing that at a massive level.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. You have given a wonderful presentation. I'm Dr. Sathya Prabha, faculty from Center for the Governance and Public Policy, National Institute of Rural Development. But as you have rightly pointed out, our office is fully following the global system only. I find it very, very easy. Even during the pandemic period, we don't have anything calling on the file, and it is highly transparent. We're able to know where the file we can locate the file, and the duration also we can check here. So it's highly transparent. So that is much. But my question is, as you said, in the ministries, they are moving on to the of the system. That the state government also move on. In that case, do they have the customizing in the language for it? So we are using the English. Local, we are using only the English language. So that's the state governments follow the language customization language for using the system. That is one, sir. The second question is about that everybody has asked about the internet services. So that's as you are moving on with many innovation activities, does the government has any policies related to providing free internet services to entire public?
Okay, let me respond. Let me respond on this. Please sit down. I think the first question was on how states are using e-office. Now, some of the most successful state-level success stories have been Orissa. Orissa, I found, used what was called the OSWAS. And it's a TCS-developed platform for digitization, for e-office. And it was extremely successful. In fact, the platform that TCS created for Orissa State as an e-office platform has far more advanced than the e-office per se that we're using. It provided for interdepartmental transfer of files. It also provided for 100% digital receipts. And it eliminated the need for even manual receipts. So it was quite advanced. The other, of course, is the Rajkaj of Rajasthan, which had developed. Every state is developing it in their own regional languages also. And as I did bring out Jammu Kashmir's Darbar movement when they adopted e-office could be made more limited and both secretariats could be operationalized. As regards digital security, you would have noticed that more and more platforms are currently shifting to two-factor authentication. And two-factor authentication is something that is becoming more and more of a reality. In fact, now to log into an email on NIC, you need two-factor authentication. To file a grievance, you need two-factor authentication. Unless a citizen identifies himself, you simply cannot log into a platform. That is what it has come to. And more transparency into the systems is being built. And the same way with virtual private networks that we are operating, each one requires 2 to 3 factor authentications. So it's not easy to hack into a system. There is a backup. Yes, there is adequate cloud space and backup for the office. Sir, thank you, sir. Akbar, I hope I answered everything you said.
Thank you, sir. It is really enlightening session for all of us, especially the initiatives taken by the Government of India for digitization. Now I would request our Chairman, sir, to honor our guest by presentation of a memento. Memento.
Thank you for this privilege to serve with you. Yeah.
इसको दीजिए
दोनों
Yeah. Your own.
Now I request our Chairman, sir, to facilitate Akbaruddin. Thank you, sir. So now I think we have come to the conclusion of the program. I would like to thank all the participants and our speakers, Shri Srinivas, for such a illuminating and informative oration on leadership in government, the whole of government approach. I'm sure that the participants here and also the audience which has joined from virtually, they have benefited from his experience and his lucidness in explaining the very complicated subject. I'm really grateful to our chairman, Shri K. Padma Bhaiya, who has spared his valuable time and has agreed to chair this particular session. He is always an inspiration to all of us at ASCI and obviously the guardian of ASCI. Thank you, sir. And my thanks is also due to Ambassador Akbaruddin, who readily accepted our request to be here on this particular occasion. And we hope to see him more because I think now he's in Hyderabad. So maybe many more occasions are going to come where we can have more interactions with him. Thank you, sir. I'm also thankful to the senior officials and guests who have joined us virtually. My colleagues from various centers in ASCI, especially our new colleagues who have very recently joined and probably it is first meeting for them. So I'm really thankful to them that they can come and have this particular participation in this discussion. And the last but not the least, I would like to thank my team, Mr. Avik Chakravarti and Ms. Madhvi Lata, and all the members of administration who have made this particular event possible. Thank you all. Thank you very much.